Africa's energy transition is gaining momentum, driven by the urgency to expand access, shifts to renewables, and attract private capital. But amid reforms, decentralization, and new actors entering the field, one issue keeps resurfacing, and that's collaboration. Can all the moving parts work together to fix Nigeria's persistent power challenges? Just days ago, some of the sector's most influential voices gathered in Lagos for the inaugural Future of Power Africa conference focused on charting a coordinated path forward. Now, amongst the issues raised, the evolving roles of market players, overlapping responsibilities between federal and state electricity actors, and the challenge of aligning efforts across the value chain. In a landmark development, Nigeria formally established the Nigerian Independent System Operator, a key mandate of the Electricity Act 2023. Now, with a newly appointed board, it is expected to enhance grid efficiency and market operations operating independently from the transmission company of Nigeria. Now, this could reshape how power is dispatched, managed, and balanced nationwide. My guest today is someone at the center of these conversations. Engineer Jude Nwoko is the convener of the Future of Power Africa Conference and MD and CEO of Millwater Limited, a firm working to plug critical power infrastructure gaps across the country. Together, we will unpack how deeper collaboration could be the key to unlocking Nigeria's power potential. Engineer Nwoko, it's such a pleasure to have you. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Abby.
Right.
It's always a pleasure to be back here to have these conversations.
And you're always most welcome. You know, congratulations. We have to start off with that. You know, today is full of congratulatory messages on your inaugural conference for the Future of Power Africa. Very well done. I can attest to the success of that, having been present. So let's begin with that. What are some of the let's probably say 2 or 3 key messages that emerged from this conference? And what do they tell us about where the sector is headed, more importantly?
You know, so basically we were driven by the passion to see enhanced collaboration between all sector players in the power sector. Now, with the new Electricity Act reform, the level playing field has been created for all players to come fully into their own, and the overlapping interests being aligned accordingly. 3 key things came out of our conversations on Wednesday. First was the urgent need for a diversification of our power sector, in terms of, just moving away from grid to renewable energy. That came out as a strong point. And there's a building momentum. The second thing that came up was there's a building momentum in the decentralization of power, from the federal concentration that we've experienced over the years, now to states being empowered by the Electricity Act to take their destinies, if you like, in their hands. And that, as good as it is, has created multiple layers for players. It has unlocked opportunities, definitely. But then we brought up the conversations around how these multiple layers would ensure that there are no overlaps in their function, and there are regulatory frameworks around which they operate, so that there are no conflicts, and that it does what it's planned to do, which is to create more big power available at an affordable rate for the average Nigerian. And finally, we saw that private sector role cannot be undermined in this sector, in that investment has to come in beyond government, sustained intervention financially to the sector. We can see that's no longer sustainable, and we are trusting that with these opportunities that have been opened up, investors will find the sector more alluring to participate in.
All right, so very pertinent discussion points there. I mean, certainly Nigeria's electricity market is expanding, but so is the number of players and even layers. How can we ensure true collaboration in a system with overlapping interests, like you've alluded to just a couple of times now, and sometimes even conflicting mandates?
That was a big concern for us, and it was one of those things that actually made the Future of Power Africa a conversation that we should prioritize at this point in time. First, we saw that there is a huge need for an alignment of visions. Now, for most of the states, if you are now empowered to produce power yourself, the first thing that might come to the average mind of an individual or a driver is revenue. But this is not just an avenue to raise revenue for the state. It is an opportunity for you to create bespoke bespoke solution to your own state needs, right? And create a framework that works particularly for your state, so that at the federal level there is a central governing framework that still is being operated, but at the state level, where you know where your challenges are, you know where the energy needs are required to be shipped onto, you create solutions that are bespoke to your state. Then secondly, there is also the need for us to begin to engage the various players at each level as to what the scope of their coverage is. If we do not, we'll create a scenario where there will be unnecessary conflicts of control. Who is in charge of this area? What's my scope? Who's in charge of the market? What's the role of organizations like NISO from a federal point of view? What's the role of the Lagos State Regulatory Electric Commission, speaking to our host state, Lagos? Where does the overlapping end? Where are the players who? For instance, we had the Commissioner LASEC, Commissioner Kofo. She spent a whole lot of time on Wednesday just explaining to us how the state hopes to own her own and to deliver value to the various players within the sector without necessarily creating an extra bureaucratic bottleneck for the players.
I mean, that's very important. But then when we look at the lines between the federal and the subnational responsibilities, these lines seem quite blurred. How do we really effectively prevent regulatory duplication or confusion right from the onset? Because when it gradually, gets institutionalized, it becomes even worse.
I tell my friends that if I know what I'm doing and you know what you're doing, we will not have conflicts, right? So first will be clear demarcation of responsibilities. Who does what? Like I said, where does the handshake start? Where do I face my own responsibilities? And there should be harmonization of regulations, right? Sometimes if you use a fine comb to go through some of the regulations that are currently being promoted, you will find some areas of conflict. So do you go with the federal stance or with the state stance? So there is a need for stakeholders to come back to the table and carry out a fine harmonization of these regulatory requirements. What do you need to be licensed to become a franchisee, for instance? What do you need to become a generator of power, an IPP generator? What do you need? What are the requirements? Once there's a harmonization, then we're encouraging a coordination mechanism where all stakeholders come together from time to time in different forums, state-driven forum, private-driven forum, where they come to look at the progress being made, right? We love what is happening right now in Lagos State, leading the effort in the state-driven power, but that coordination mechanism is very important. And I mean, the last I'll mention in that is standardization. I love the fact that Lagos have our own ISO standards that they expect every player within the state to abide by. But it shouldn't be just a Lagos State thing. Every state being empowered to go into power production, power distribution. There must be a huge emphasis on standardization because the consumers need to be protected. And finally on that, I'll mention the fact that dispute resolution methods must be put in place, because there will be these overlaps, because we originally have discos who were given licenses to operate in certain areas. Now the states have been empowered to also, I don't see it as compete, I see it as collaborate with the distribution companies that are already existing to ensure that unserved and underserved areas of their states receive adequate power. And with the momentum we see, great times ahead for the power sector.
All right, so it sounds like quite a number of stopgaps are in place. And you speak about harmonization, very key. Also, we've heard about this handshake quite a bit as a term. In practical terms, you've also explained what this handshake should look like. I hate to be such a realist about it, but what happens when this handshake does not go as smoothly as we envisage? What are the real stopgaps for that eventuality?
We hope it does happen we hope that the handshake is as smooth as it should be. If it doesn't happen, we're going to have the continued inadequate power supply to the state. We're going to have high tariff system where people are having to produce power for themselves. We're going to have conflicts over who is operating where and who shouldn't operate. Or rather than serve the people, the players are involved in conflict resolution. They're involved with continuous conversations. In the sector, we're tired of talking. It's time to move. So our recommendation is that constant engagement is encouraged between the various players. You know, what the Future of Power Africa did was that it brought together first regulators, right? We had folks from the regulatory bodies who came to shine light on the regulatory requirements. And then we had a full panel conversation where operators, and we had someone from the GENCO, we had someone from the DISCO, we had drivers who were independent power producing companies, and we also had someone who represented just freelance traders. Now, in that panel, there was a robust conversation as to how everybody brings in their own strength in the development. I tell you, every part play a key role. If we have a gap in generation, we have something trouble to deal with. If the generation is even optimal and the transmission system being wheeled through TCN is inadequate, we hear of current and frequent grid collapse. Once there is a gap in that area, we also have something to deal with. That's why we are encouraging that there's diversification as much as possible so that our power needs are not heavily reliant on one source. So that handshake becomes very important, and all stakeholders must do all we can to ensure that it's as smooth as it can be.
So it's great to hear that there's what appears to be a good roadmap looking at it from this point. Let's get a little bit more granular and look at some of the situations, like tensions arising currently as we speak between some of the state governments and the DISCOs over, of course, who should lead power delivery. What are some of the mediation tools to arrive at, some sort of solution to this and avoid a repetition in future? And more importantly, what's driving this conflict?
First, you know what it is. It's a power play. Who is in charge? Who is not? What's my scope? How would my revenue be impacted by this new law? But you see, like I said, overall, our collaboration first must be driven by the same goal. What is our main goal in this season, this period in the power sector? We want to make power more affordable and readily available for the average Nigerian. Now, if that's our unified goal, then the issue of territorialism, who is here and who is not, should be totally tossed off the window. It should be more of collaboration. And I dare to suggest a few tools for collaboration. I feel that negotiation and dialogue should be employed where there are already tensions. I don't know of any states where there are tensions, because in most states where we have operated, i.e. Lagos, Ogun, as players, Enugu, we see that even the DISCOs that were existing there already knew that they were already struggling with the demand, and any form of collaboration would be necessary or would be welcome. So negotiations and dialogue, because sometimes the dispute point could be something as trivial as where does my coverage stop, or where. But the issue now is, are you serving the customers? Can it be done better? And once we go into those negotiations, dispute resolution mechanisms should be put in place. Who are the arbitrators? What is the role of regulators? Can there be third parties who come into this conversation to say, okay, this is how we move forward from here, and make sure that we are unlocking value for ourselves as a company. But more importantly, we are providing power for the average Nigerian to run their business, to live life to its full. Now, speaking about the power in the insufficient power in Nigeria, the opportunity cost for us is huge. It's not even just the cost of the tariff, because most average Nigerians will come to the conversation of should there be subsidy or not. I don't want to go there because it's murky ground, but it's clear to us that what we miss when there is no power is beyond what we can afford, opportunities that are missed, businesses that could have been set up, educational transformation, innovation that we would have gone into. We are a creative country. We are filled with a teeming population of youth that can be put to great productive work if only powers are available. So regulatory framework should be built to ensure that these disputes don't stand in the way of the productivity of one of the biggest Black African nation on earth, Nigeria. We're looking forward to a season where, based on the enhanced collaboration between all stakeholders, when we sit down regularly, we have dialogues where our goal is to improve the quality of life of the average Nigerian by providing power for them, for their businesses, for their lives, for every other entertainment. We know Nigeria is a strong entertainment hub. The moment that becomes our collective goal and we put these frameworks in place, disputes will be less, and we'll have a more forward-thinking approach to the power sector in Nigeria.
Well, I hear a lot of optimism from you, and I hope that this optimism ripples across the industry. But speaking of optimism, with the emergence of the Nigerian Independent System Operator, there is that hope for better coordination as well. What do you think? Do you believe that NISO can realistically, play a huge role in making the system and market operations a little more coherent?
We're excited about that development. Part of NISO's work is to facilitate the market and to engender better collaboration, stakeholder engagement, and to a good data management and analysis system such that she can encourage the players to bank more on innovation and technology in driving the sector forward. But like every other body that's been set up, there must be the will of all the drivers to ensure that the original goal of the association or the body being set up is achieved. Many times we see that if the players are not aligned, they form another layer of bureaucratic bottleneck. We don't need another figurehead association. We just need people who will come into the sector, unlock the gaps, create enhanced collaboration between players, and the moment that is done, and from the outside, investors see that the sector is ripe for investment. I tell you the truth, Abby, a lot of folks are waiting on the sideline to invest in the Nigeria power sector. The case we have is not an inability to get investors or attract investors. Investors are waiting, but they're just looking at the right playing field for them to step into the business. And we are hoping that these developments just create just that for the sector in this time.
All right. Speaking of the playing field, it appears quite level currently, but you also touched on rules of engagement very briefly earlier. Do you believe that these rules of engagement are clear enough for all players as we speak?
We are encouraging continuous training and reorientation. Now, some of these things remain in pages of the book, and people are reticent sometimes to study and see what these laws are and what they even imply. So we at Future of Power Africa, in all our engagement, one of our advocacy is to encourage especially regulators to continuously carry out a crusade of informing people on the new regulations and continuous training of all the stakeholders. For instance, I feel that everyone within the GENCO space, the DISCO space, are ripe for training on the new policies and how they can take advantage of it as an organization and provide the value the organization has been set up for. The moment we continue these engagements in form of trainings, reorientation, policy briefs, and then private bodies like ours engage the public and shine light on these developments, the sector will be attractive for all.
Right.
And we'll see improved power over time. I'm very optimistic that there's a new dawn in the power space.
Extremely optimistic it sounds, very promising it sounds. I want to wrap, we have less than a minute left, but I want to wrap up with a question that is probably on the minds of quite a number of people, given the complexity of the landscape. Who would you say should take the lead when it comes to defining roles currently? Should it be Ministry of Power, even NISO? Very briefly, please.
I feel the states should take their destinies in their hands and collaborate with every other structure that has been put in place from a federal point of view to take advantage of all the federal framework that have been put in place. But the states, every state has her own peculiarity. They should take their destinies in their hand. It's time to run. It's time to deliver power to every citizen of your state. That would be my encouragement.
Very well put. Many thanks. If you joined us midway, I've been chatting with Engineer Jude Nwoko, who is Managing Director and Chief Executive at Millwater Limited, is also the convener of the Future of Power Africa. Many thanks, Engineer Nwoko, for joining us. And of course, we'll be seeing you again very soon, hopefully.